The coffee pot was heavy in Rachel Torr's hand as she moved quietly along the back wall of the briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. Steam rose from the silver spout as she refilled cup after cup for the officers seated around the long conference table. "Thank you," one lieutenant said without looking up. Rachel nodded silently and moved on. She'd learned in the past 6 weeks that silence was her best friend here. Silence and invisibility. The briefing room was full this Thursday morning. SEALs, special warfare officers, intelligence analysts. All men except for 2 female intelligence officers seated near the front. They were discussing operational readiness for an upcoming deployment to the Middle East. Rachel knew this world. She'd lived it for 8 years. But that was before the injury, before the medical discharge, before she'd become just another invisible woman in Navy utilities, serving coffee and running errands at the base where she'd once been a warrior. "More coffee here," a gruff voice called from the middle of the table. Rachel approached and poured. The officer didn't acknowledge her. Why would he? She was support staff now, furniture that happened to pour coffee. At the head of the table, Commander James "Hawk" Hawkins was leading the briefing. He was a SEAL legend, 23 years in the teams, 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, multiple Bronze Stars. Rachel had heard stories about him for years but had never served under his command. "The terrain is going to be challenging," Hawkins was saying, pointing to a map projected on the screen. "Mountainous region, limited extraction points. We need personnel who can handle altitude, cold weather operations, and extended periods without resupply." "Sir, what about cross-training with the Air Force?" someone asked. "Already in the works," Hawkins replied. "We've got pararescue joining us for the joint exercise next month." Rachel listened as she worked. She couldn't help it. This was the life she'd lost, the world she no longer belonged to. She'd been one of the first women to complete basic underwater demolition SEAL training. It had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, 6 months of hell that pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had. Hell Week alone had broken men twice her size, but Rachel had made it through. She'd earned her trident. She'd become a SEAL. For 3 years, she'd served on SEAL team operations. She'd deployed twice, conducting reconnaissance missions and working with local forces. She'd proven herself again and again, and she'd loved every minute of it. Then came the mission in Syria. Rachel pushed the memory away as she always did. Some things were too painful to think about even now. The explosion, the collapsing building, her team getting out but Rachel trapped under debris for 40 minutes before extraction, the crushed vertebrae in her lower back, the surgery, the months of rehabilitation. The medical board's decision, permanent physical disability, unfit for SEAL operations. She'd fought the decision. She'd worked with physical therapists until they begged her to slow down. She'd passed every fitness test they'd given her. But the Navy doctors were clear. The injury made her a liability in combat situations. One wrong movement, one bad fall, and she could be paralyzed. So at 31 years old, Rachel's SEAL career was over. But she still had 6 years left on her service commitment. The Navy offered her a medical retirement, but Rachel wasn't ready to give up the uniform. So they'd reassigned her, administrative duties at Naval Special Warfare Command. Filing, answering phones, making coffee. It was like being a ghost haunting her own former life. "That's all for today," Commander Hawkins announced, bringing Rachel back to the present. "Dismissed." Officers began filing out. Rachel started collecting empty cups and discarded papers. As she reached for a coffee cup near the end of the table, her sleeve rode up slightly, exposing her left forearm. She quickly tugged it back down, but not before catching a glimpse of what was there. A tattoo of a SEAL trident, the eagle clutching an anchor, trident, and pistol. Beneath it, in small script, were the words, "The only easy day was yesterday." It was the SEAL motto, and the tattoo was something only people who'd earned the trident got. It was sacred, a mark of honor that you didn't take lightly. Rachel had gotten hers after her first deployment. Now it felt like a memorial to a life that was dead. She finished cleaning up and carried the tray of cups toward the door. As she passed Commander Hawkins, who was gathering his papers, he looked up. "Thank you," he said. "Sir," Rachel replied with a slight nod. For just a moment their eyes met. She thought she saw something there, a flash of recognition or maybe just curiosity. But then it was gone and Rachel continued out the door. The rest of the day passed in its usual monotony. Rachel filed reports, answered emails, and helped coordinate schedules. At 1700 hours, she headed to her car in the parking lot. But instead of going home to her small apartment off base, Rachel drove to the beach. She did this most evenings, parking near the Silver Strand and walking along the shore as the sun set. It was the only time she felt close to the person she used to be. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before her, dark and endless. Rachel stood at the water's edge, letting the waves wash over her boots. She thought about her team, the men she'd served with, most of them still deployed, still living the life she'd lost. They'd tried to stay in touch at first. Texts, occasional calls, but it was painful for everyone. What could they talk about? Their missions were classified, and Rachel's new life consisted of making coffee and filing papers. Eventually, the communication had dwindled to occasional check-ins. They were still her brothers, but they were living in a world she no longer belonged to. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from her father, a retired Army Ranger. "How you doing, Mija?" She typed back, "Good, just at the beach." "You still thinking about that civilian job offer?" A defense contractor had reached out last month, offering her a position as a security consultant. Good pay, travel, a chance to use her skills, but it would mean leaving the Navy completely. "Still thinking," Rachel replied. "Don't stay somewhere that doesn't value you," her father wrote back. "Life's too short." Rachel stared at the message for a long time before pocketing her phone. Her father was right, of course. She was wasting her skills, her training, her experience. She should take the civilian job, start fresh somewhere that would appreciate what she could do instead of what she couldn't. But leaving the Navy meant admitting it was really over, meant accepting that she'd never be a SEAL again. She wasn't ready for that yet. As darkness fell, Rachel headed back to her car. Tomorrow would be another day of coffee pots and filing cabinets, another day of being invisible in the world where she'd once been exceptional. But what choice did she have? The injury had taken her future. The medical board had taken her career. All she had left was the uniform and the memories. Rachel drove home through the Coronado streets, past the Naval Special Warfare Center where new SEAL candidates were probably running beach drills right now. She didn't look. It hurt too much. In her apartment, she made a simple dinner and ate alone. On her bookshelf was a photo from her SEAL graduation, Rachel in the middle of her class, trident gleaming on her chest, smile wide and proud. She looked away from it. At 2200 hours, Rachel went to bed. She dreamed, as she often did, of the mission in Syria. The explosion, the weight of the debris, the darkness, her team calling her name. And the moment she'd realized that even if she survived, nothing would ever be the same. Rachel woke at 500, covered in sweat. She got up, showered, dressed in her utilities, and prepared to face another day of being nobody in the place where she'd once been somebody. The coffee pot was waiting. Friday morning started like every other day. Rachel arrived at Naval Special Warfare Command at 6:30, made the first pot of coffee, and began preparing the briefing room for the day's meetings. The routine was numbingly familiar by now. At 800, officers started filing in for the weekly intelligence briefing. Rachel took her usual position against the back wall, coffee pot in hand, ready to refill cups as needed. Commander Hawkins entered last, carrying a folder thick with documents. He took his position at the head of the table and began the briefing, updates on regional threats, recent intelligence from the Middle East, operational considerations for the upcoming deployment. Rachel poured coffee mechanically, her mind half present. She'd learned to tune out during these briefings. Hearing about missions she'd never be part of was too painful. "We've received intelligence about a high-value target in the Helmand province," Hawkins was saying. "The challenge is the terrain. Mountainous caves, limited visibility. We need someone with experience in." Rachel leaned forward to refill a captain's cup. As she did, her sleeve rode up again, exposing the SEAL trident tattoo on her forearm. She didn't notice, but Commander Hawkins did. His voice stopped mid-sentence. There was a brief pause, and then he continued, but Rachel caught something different in his tone. She glanced up and found him looking directly at her. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Then Hawkins looked back at his briefing materials and continued speaking. Rachel quickly tugged her sleeve down and stepped back against the wall, her heart pounding. Had he seen it? Did he recognize what it meant? The briefing continued for another 30 minutes. Rachel barely heard any of it. She was hyper-aware of Hawkins's presence at the front of the room, wondering if he'd noticed, wondering what it meant if he had. When the meeting finally ended and officers began filing out, Rachel started her usual cleanup routine. She was collecting cups when she heard Hawkins's voice behind her. "Petty Officer Torres." Rachel turned, "Sir." "A moment, please," Hawkins gestured to the chairs. "Sit down." Rachel's stomach tightened. This was unusual. Officers didn't ask support staff to sit down for conversations. She set down the tray and sat, ramrod straight, hands folded. Hawkins settled into a chair across from her. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of years in the sun and sand. "How long have you been working in admin here?" he asked. 6 weeks, sir." "And before that?" Rachel hesitated. "Medical leave, sir, rehabilitation." Hawkins nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment studying her. Then he said, "I saw your tattoo." Rachel's hand instinctively moved to her left forearm, though it was covered by her sleeve now. "That's a seal trident," Hawkins continued. "Not something people get casually, so I pulled your service record this morning." He paused. "Petty Officer First Class Rachel Torres, but S-Class 367, completed training, earned your trident, served with SEAL Team 3, 2 deployments, Purple Heart, Bronze Star for Valor, medically reassigned following injuries sustained during combat operations in Syria." Rachel's throat was tight. "Yes, sir." "The Bronze Star citation says you held a position under enemy fire for 40 minutes while your team evacuated civilians. You were trapped in a collapsed building, but continued to provide covering fire and intelligence updates until extraction. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir." Hawkins leaned back in his chair. "So let me understand this. One of my SEALs, someone who earned the trident, who served with distinction, who has combat experience and specialized training, is working as administrative support, making coffee." Rachel didn't know what to say. "I was medically disqualified from SEAL operations, sir. This was the assignment I was given." "What was the medical issue?" "Crushed vertebrae, L4 and L5. Surgery was successful, but the Navy Medical Board determined I was at too high risk for combat duty. One wrong impact could cause paralysis." "But you can walk, run, perform normal duties." "Yes, sir. I passed all standard fitness requirements, just not the ones for SEAL operations." Hawkins was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you want, Torres? If you could do anything in the Navy right now, what would it be?" The question caught Rachel off guard. No one had asked her that. Everyone had just told her what she couldn't do anymore. "I want to serve, sir," she said finally. "I want to use my training. I don't expect to be in the teams again. I understand my limitations. But making coffee when I have 8 years of special operations experience feels like..." She stopped herself. "Feels like what?" "Feels like a waste, sir." Hawkins nodded. "It is a waste, a significant waste." He stood up. "I'm going to make some calls, don't go anywhere." He left the briefing room, leaving Rachel sitting alone, her mind racing. What had just happened? What did he mean by making calls? 20 minutes later, Hawkins returned with another officer, a woman in her late 40s with captain's insignia and an intelligence badge. "Torres, this is Captain Sarah Chen, our intelligence division head. Captain Chen, this is Petty Officer Torres." Rachel stood quickly. "Ma'am." "Sit, please," Captain Chen said. She had sharp eyes and a direct manner. "Commander Hawkins tells me you have combat experience in Syria and Afghanistan. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you speak Arabic? It's in your file." "Yes, ma'am, fluent. I also speak Pashto at a conversational level." Chen exchanged a look with Hawkins. "We have a problem, Torres. We're training teams for deployment to a region where we desperately need people with your skill set, combat experience, language skills, cultural knowledge. But we're short-staffed. Most of our intelligence analysts haven't been in-country. They're brilliant at analysis but don't understand the ground truth." Rachel's pulse quickened. "Ma'am, I'm happy to help in any way I can." "I need someone who can train our teams in cultural awareness and language basics before deployment," Chen continued. "Someone who can review intelligence and provide context based on real-world experience. Someone who can work with our analysts to make sense of what we're seeing in the field." She paused. You can't deploy with combat teams anymore, but that doesn't mean you can't contribute to mission success. Rachel felt something stirring in her chest, something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. I would be honored, ma'am. It's not a SEAL billet, Hawkins interjected. It's intelligence support, but it's real work that matters, work that will save lives. I understand, sir. Captain Chen pulled out a tablet. I'm going to need you to go through a security review, it's just procedure, and we'll need to formalize the transfer from admin to intelligence division. But if you're willing, I can have you start next week. I'm willing, ma'am, absolutely willing. After Chen left to begin the paperwork, Hawkins remained behind. Why did you do this, sir? Rachel asked quietly. You don't know me, why go to bat for someone you just met? Hawkins was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 7 years ago I took shrapnel in my leg during an operation in Iraq. Doctors said I'd probably never run again, let alone stay in the teams. I fought like hell to prove them wrong, did a year of rehab, passed every test. But the truth was I was slower. Not much, but enough to be a liability in certain situations. He rolled up his right sleeve, showing a long scar running from elbow to wrist. I had a choice. I could fight to stay in a position I wasn't quite fit for anymore, risking my team, or I could find a new way to serve. I chose to move into training and command. It wasn't what I'd planned for my career, but I've trained hundreds of SEALs who have gone on to do incredible things. I've planned operations that have saved American lives. I serve differently now, but I still serve. He met Rachel's eyes. You earned that Trident Tours, you bled for it. The fact that you can't kick down doors anymore doesn't mean you don't have value. It just means your value is in a different place now. Rachel's eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. Thank you, sir, for seeing me. You were never invisible, Hawkins said. I just wasn't paying attention. That's on me, and I apologize. Over the weekend, Rachel went through the security review process and met with Captain Chen's team. By Monday morning, she had a new assignment: intelligence analyst and cultural advisor for naval special warfare operations. Her first day in her new position, Rachel walked into the intelligence office and was greeted by a team of 5 analysts, 3 men and 2 women, all younger than her, all civilians or junior officers. Everyone, this is Petty Officer Tours, Captain Chen announced. She's joining us from SEAL Team 3, where she served 2 combat deployments. She's going to be providing ground truth perspective on our Middle East intelligence and training our deploying teams on cultural and language essentials. The analysts looked at Rachel with new interest. One of them, a young lieutenant named Marcus Webb, extended his hand. A real SEAL, he said with genuine respect. We could really use your expertise. We've been analyzing satellite imagery and communications, but we don't always understand the context of what we're seeing. Happy to help, Rachel said. That first week, Rachel threw herself into the work. She reviewed intelligence reports, providing context based on her experiences in-country. She identified cultural nuances that the analysts had missed. She began developing a training program for teams preparing to deploy. It was different from being in the field, but it was real work, important work. And for the first time in months, Rachel felt like herself again. On Friday afternoon, as she was preparing to leave, Commander Hawkins stopped by the intelligence office. How's it going, Tours? Good, sir, really good. Captain Chen tells me you've already made significant contributions. There's talk of sending you to Virginia to brief JSOC on your analysis of the regional situation. Rachel's eyes widened. Joint Special Operations Command, that was big. I'd welcome the opportunity, sir. Hawkins smiled. You're going to do great things here, Tours, different things than you planned, but great nonetheless. He started to leave, then turned back. By the way, you don't have to hide that tattoo anymore. You earned it. Wear it with pride. After he left, Rachel looked down at her left forearm. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeve, exposing the SEAL Trident tattoo. She'd spent weeks trying to hide it, ashamed of what she'd lost. But Hawkins was right. She'd earned this. The injury hadn't taken that away. Rachel Tours was still a SEAL. She just served differently now. And that was enough. 3 weeks into her new position, Rachel was briefing a SEAL team preparing for deployment to Afghanistan. 12 men sat in the classroom, all of them younger than her, all of them watching her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The Helmand province has changed significantly since 2019. Rachel was explaining, pointing to a map on the screen. The tribal dynamics are different. The Taliban presence has shifted. What worked 5 years ago won't work now. One of the SEALs, a cocky-looking operator with a California tan, raised his hand. With respect, when were you last in country? 2 years ago, Rachel replied evenly. Things change fast. How do we know your intel is still relevant? Rachel recognized the challenge for what it was. He wasn't really asking about her information. He was questioning whether she belonged here at all. You're right, things change fast, she said. That's why I've been reviewing current intelligence reports, analyzing recent communications intercepts, and coordinating with assets still in the region. The cultural foundations I'm teaching don't change as quickly as tactical situations. Understanding how to approach village elders, how to read social dynamics, how to avoid accidentally offending someone, that knowledge is timeless. She pulled up a new slide showing a village compound. Last month, a team went into a village in Kandahar province to meet with a local leader. They entered through the front entrance, walked past the women's quarters, and wondered why the meeting went poorly. Anyone see the problem? The SEALs looked at each other. A few shrugged. In Pashtun culture, the women's area is private, Rachel explained. By walking past it, even innocently, you showed disrespect. The village elder lost face in front of his people. The team didn't mean to cause offense, but they lost a valuable contact because they didn't understand the cultural context. She had their attention now. I'm not here to teach you how to shoot or how to plan an assault, Rachel continued. You're SEALs, you're the best in the world at that. I'm here to teach you how to operate in a culture that's fundamentally different from your own. How to build rapport, how to gather intelligence without creating enemies, how to come home successful instead of just coming home. The cocky SEAL nodded slowly. Okay, I can respect that. For the next 2 hours, Rachel walked them through scenarios, cultural practices, basic Pashto phrases, and behavioral expectations. She told them stories from her own deployments, mistakes she'd made and learned from, successes that came from cultural understanding. By the end of the session, the SEALs were engaged, asking questions, taking notes. As they filed out, the team leader, a senior chief named Rodriguez, stopped to talk with her. That was good stuff, Torres, really useful, he hesitated. I heard you were in the teams. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Rachel had been asked this question a dozen times in the past few weeks. She developed a simple answer. Took some damage in Syria. Medical board said I couldn't stay operational, but I'm still serving, just differently. Rodriguez nodded. My brother was Army, lost his leg in Iraq. He struggled with what came after, you know. Felt like if he wasn't kicking doors, he wasn't really serving. I understand that feeling. Yeah, but here's the thing. He's working at the VA now, helping other wounded vets navigate the system. He saves lives every day, just not with a rifle. Rodriguez met her eyes. What you're doing matters, Torres. What you taught us today could keep my men alive. That's worth a lot. After he left, Rachel sat alone in the empty classroom for a moment. She thought about what Rodriguez had said, about serving differently, about saving lives in new ways. Maybe she was finally starting to believe it. That afternoon, Captain Chen called Rachel into her office. I have a situation, Chen said without preamble. We've received intelligence about a potential target in Yemen, high-value individual with ties to terrorist organizations, but the information is murky. I need someone with ground experience to help us figure out if this is legitimate or if we're being fed bad intel. What's the source? Rachel asked. Local informant. He's been reliable in the past, but this feels different. The pattern doesn't quite match what we usually see. Chen pulled up files on her screen. I'd like you to review everything and give me your assessment. Rachel spent the next 6 hours deep in intelligence files. Communications intercepts, satellite imagery, reports from assets in the region, financial data, social media analysis. Something was off. The pieces didn't quite fit together. She went back through the informant's previous reports, looking for patterns. And there it was, subtle inconsistencies in the current intel that didn't match his established reporting style. Details that seemed too perfect, too convenient. At 1900 hours, Rachel knocked on Captain Chen's office door. I think it's a setup, Rachel said. Chen looked up sharply. Explain. The informant's previous reports are detailed but messy. names misspelled, dates approximate, information that requires verification. Real intelligence is rarely clean, but this new report is too polished. Every detail aligns perfectly. The timeline is suspiciously convenient. Rachel pulled up a comparison on her tablet. More importantly, the target's supposed location is in an area that was abandoned 2 months ago. Current satellite imagery shows no activity there. So you think someone is trying to lure a team into a trap? Or discredit the informant, or test our response patterns? I can't say for certain, but I wouldn't recommend acting on this intelligence without further verification. Chen studied the evidence Rachel had compiled. Good work, Tors. I'll kick this up the chain for further investigation. She paused. You just potentially saved a SEAL team from walking into an ambush. Rachel felt a surge of satisfaction. This was real contribution, real impact. Just doing my job, ma'am. You're doing it well. Over the following weeks, Rachel's reputation grew. Teams preparing for deployment specifically requested her cultural briefings. Intelligence analysts sought her input on regional assessments. She was invited to brief senior leadership at JSOC headquarters in Virginia, where admirals and generals listened carefully to her analysis. But not everyone was happy about her new prominence. Lieutenant Commander Frank Morrison had been the primary intelligence briefer for SEAL operations before Rachel arrived. He was a career intelligence officer, smart, experienced, and not particularly pleased about being overshadowed by a former enlisted SEAL. I hear you're heading to Virginia next week, Morrison said one afternoon, stopping by Rachel's desk. His tone was friendly, but his eyes weren't. Yes, sir, briefing on regional cultural dynamics. That's usually my job, Morrison said. I've been doing those briefings for 3 years. Captain Chen thought my field experience would add value, sir. Field experience. Morrison's smile was thin. Tors, you did what, 2 deployments? I've been analyzing this region for a decade. I've briefed hundreds of operations, but sure, a few months in-country makes you the expert. Rachel kept her voice neutral. I'm not trying to replace anyone, sir, just contributing where I can. Right, just remember, being a SEAL doesn't make you an intelligence professional. That takes different skills. Skills that require more than muscles and a trident tattoo. He walked away, leaving Rachel staring at her computer screen, jaw tight. She wanted to be angry, but part of her wondered if Morrison had a point. Was she stepping on toes, overreaching beyond her expertise? That evening, Rachel stayed late at the office, reviewing her upcoming Virginia briefing. She wanted it to be perfect. No mistakes, no gaps that Morrison or anyone else could point to. She was so focused that she didn't notice Commander Hawkins until he knocked on her desk. Working late, Tors. Rachel stood quickly. Sir, just preparing for the Virginia briefing. I heard Morrison gave you some grief today. Rachel hesitated. He has valid concerns, sir. He's been doing this longer than I have. Morrison is a good intelligence officer, Hawkins agreed. But he's also territorial and doesn't like change. You know what the difference is between you and him. Experience, sir. Perspective. Morrison analyzes intelligence from a distance. You lived it. You understand the ground truth in a way that no amount of academic study can teach. Both perspectives are valuable, but right now, we need yours more. He sat down across from her. You're going to encounter resistance, Tors. Some people won't like that a former enlisted operator is briefing admirals. Some people will think you're trading on your SEAL status instead of your actual expertise. You need to be twice as good to get half the credit. I know, sir. But here's what else you need to know. You belong here. You've earned this position through your work, not through favoritism or sympathy. Own that. Don't apologize for your expertise or your experience. Just be excellent and let the work speak for itself. Rachel nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. After Hawkins left, Rachel returned to her briefing preparation. But this time, she wasn't working from a place of insecurity or trying to prove herself. She was working because she was good at this, because her analysis mattered, because somewhere a SEAL team would make better decisions because of her intelligence. That was enough. The Virginia briefing went exceptionally well. Rachel presented her analysis to a room full of senior officers, fielding tough questions with confidence. A 3-star admiral specifically praised her cultural insights and requested she return for follow-up briefings. When she returned to Coronado, Captain Chen was waiting with news. The Navy is establishing a new position, Cultural Affairs Liaison for Naval Special Warfare. Someone who bridges the gap between intelligence and operations, providing cultural and regional expertise for deploying teams. They want you for the role. Rachel's breath caught. Ma'am, I'm honored, but I'm enlisted. That sounds like an officer's billet. It is, which is why they're offering you a commission. Direct appointment to lieutenant based on your experience and expertise. You'd need to go through officer candidate school, but it's a formality in your case. An officer? Rachel had never imagined that path for herself. What if I'm not ready for that, ma'am? Tours, you've been leading and training teams for weeks now. You're already doing the job. The commission just makes it official. Chen smiled slightly. Take some time to think about it, but don't take too long. They want an answer by next week. That night, Rachel called her father. They want to make me an officer, Dad. Her father was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed deep and warm. Of course they do, Mija. You're brilliant. I'm not sure I'm cut out for it. Why not? Because I'm not supposed to be here. I was supposed to be in the teams. This wasn't the plan. Life rarely follows our plans, her father said gently. You know what I learned in 30 years in the Army? Success isn't about following a specific path. It's about adapting to the path you're on and making the most of it. You didn't plan to be an intelligence officer, but you're damn good at it, so why not embrace it? Rachel thought about everything that had happened since Commander Hawkins noticed her tattoo, the opportunities she'd been given, the lives she'd potentially saved through her analysis, the SEALs she'd trained who would be better prepared because of her. Okay, she said, I'll do it. That's my girl. The next morning, Rachel walked into Captain Chen's office and accepted the commission. 3 months later, Ensign Rachel Torres graduated from Officer Candidate School. Commander Hawkins was there for the ceremony, along with Captain Chen and several of the SEAL teams she'd trained. As they pinned her new insignia, Rachel thought about the tattoo on her left forearm, the SEAL trident that she'd tried so hard to hide. She didn't hide it anymore. She'd earned it, and now she was earning something new, a different kind of respect, a different kind of service. The path wasn't what she'd planned, but it was hers. And it was enough. Lieutenant Rachel Torres stood at the podium in the main briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command, looking out at an audience of over 60 SEAL operators, intelligence officers, and senior leadership. It was the largest group she'd briefed since accepting her commission 6 months ago. Cultural intelligence isn't just about avoiding mistakes, Rachel was saying, clicking to a new slide. It's about gaining operational advantage. When you understand how a community thinks, how they make decisions, what they value, you can predict behavior, build alliances, and accomplish your mission more effectively. She walked them through case studies from her own deployments, analyzing what had worked and what hadn't. The room was completely silent, everyone focused. In the back row, Commander Hawkins watched with satisfaction. Beside him sat Admiral Richard Keller, the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, Hawkins's boss. She's exceptional, Admiral Keller murmured. Yes, sir, she is. I read her latest intelligence assessment on the Somalia situation. Best analysis I've seen in years. She's seeing patterns that our senior analysts missed. The Admiral paused. I'm thinking about sending her to the Pentagon. There's a new joint task force being formed, focused on cultural intelligence across all special operations forces. She'd be perfect for it. Hawkins felt a pang of loss. He'd come to think of Rachel as his project, his success story. But he knew better than to hold talent back. She'd excel there, sir. At the podium, Rachel was taking questions. A young SEAL lieutenant raised his hand. Ma'am, what do you say to people who think cultural stuff is soft? That we should just focus on mission objectives and not worry about winning hearts and minds? Rachel smiled slightly. I'd say that every mission happens in a cultural context. You can have the best tactics in the world, but if you alienate the local population, you create more enemies than you eliminate. Smart warfare isn't just about firepower. It's about understanding the environment you're operating in. She paused. Also, I'd remind them that the most successful SEAL operations in history weren't the loudest or the most violent. They were the ones where we understood the terrain, both physical and cultural, better than anyone else. The lieutenant nodded, satisfied. After the briefing concluded, several officers came up to speak with Rachel. As she was answering questions, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Senior Chief Rodriguez, the team leader she'd briefed months ago. "Chief Rodriguez," Rachel greeted him. "How was the deployment?" "Successful, ma'am, and I wanted to thank you personally. That cultural training you gave us made a real difference. We were able to build rapport with village elders that previous teams had struggled with. Got intelligence that led to 3 successful operations." "That's excellent to hear." "There's more," Rodriguez hesitated. "There was a moment where we were in a tense situation with a local militia. Could have gone sideways fast, but I remembered what you taught us about Pashtun honor culture, about how to de-escalate without anyone losing face. We walked away with a new ally instead of a firefight." He met her eyes. "You saved lives, ma'am, maybe my team's lives." Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I'm just glad I could help." After Rodriguez left, Admiral Keller approached. "Lieutenant Torres, a moment, please." Rachel snapped to attention. "Sir." "Walk with me." They stepped out of the briefing room and into the corridor. The Admiral was a lean, gray-haired man in his late 50s, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 30 years earning respect. "That was an impressive briefing," Keller said. "Thank you, sir. I've been watching your work since you joined the Intelligence Division. You've made significant contributions in a short time." They paused near a window overlooking the training complex. "I'm offering you a position at the Pentagon, Joint Special Operations Cultural Intelligence Task Force. You'd be working with all branches of Special Operations, SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces, Air Force Special Tactics, developing doctrine, training programs, strategic analysis." Rachel's pulse quickened. The Pentagon, Joint Operations, this was a major opportunity. "I'm honored, sir. May I ask why me?" "Because you have something rare, operational experience combined with analytical skills and the ability to communicate complex ideas clearly. You've lived both sides of this work. You understand what operators need because you were one." Keller turned to face her directly. "The military is changing, Torres. We're recognizing that cultural intelligence is as important as any weapons system. We need people who can lead that change. I think you're one of those people." "When would you need an answer, sir?" "Take a week, think about it, talk to your mentors." He smiled slightly. "Though I suspect Commander Hawkins will tell you to take the job." After the Admiral left, Rachel stood alone in the corridor, processing what had just happened. The Pentagon, strategic level work, shaping the future of special operations. A year ago, she'd been making coffee, invisible and forgotten. That evening, Rachel met Captain Chen for dinner at a small restaurant off base. She'd come to think of Chen as not just her boss, but a mentor and friend. "The Pentagon," Chen said, raising her glass of wine. "That's big time, Rachel." "It's intimidating," Rachel admitted. "I've only been an officer for 6 months. Am I really ready for something like this?" "Are you kidding? You've been doing strategic-level work since you started in my division. This just makes it official." Chen set down her glass. "But I understand the hesitation. It's a big change. You've built something here in Coronado. You have relationships, a support system." "And I'd be leaving all that." "Yes and no. You'd be leaving the daily interactions, but the relationships don't disappear. And think about the impact you could have at that level. Instead of training a few teams, you'd be shaping how all special operations forces approach cultural intelligence." Rachel nodded slowly. "Commander Hawkins said something similar when he first moved me into intelligence, that serving differently doesn't mean serving less." "He was right." Chen leaned forward. "Let me tell you something. When I first made captain, I had an opportunity to take a prestigious posting in intelligence analysis. But I had a young daughter, and the position would have meant constant travel. I turned it down because I thought my family needed me more." "What happened?" "My daughter grew up, became independent, and I realized I could have done both, been a good mother and pursued that opportunity. I don't regret my choice, but I learned that sometimes we limit ourselves based on fear, not reality." She met Rachel's eyes. "You're not too young for this position. You're not unqualified. The only question is whether you're willing to take the risk." That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about the path that had brought her here. The injury in Syria that had ended her SEAL career. The months of bitterness and depression. The humiliating reassignment to administrative work. Commander Hawkins noticing her tattoo and seeing her for who she really was. Every step had felt like a setback at the time, but each one had led her here. The next morning, Rachel requested a meeting with Commander Hawkins. They met in his office, and Rachel didn't waste time with small talk. The Admiral offered me the Pentagon position. I know, he cleared it with me first, wanted to make sure I wouldn't stand in your way. What do you think I should do, sir? Hawkins leaned back in his chair. What do you want to do? I want to serve where I can make the most difference, but I'm also scared of failing, of being in over my head. Let me tell you a story, Hawkins said. When I transitioned from operations to training command, I felt like a fraud. I'd been a door kicker my whole career. Suddenly, I was supposed to teach strategy and leadership. I felt unqualified. What changed? I realized that being qualified isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to learn, to adapt, and to put in the work. You've proven you can do all three. He paused. Rachel, a year ago you were serving coffee. Now admirals are asking for your intelligence assessments. You've already proven you can succeed at levels beyond what anyone expected. Why stop now? Rachel smiled slightly. You're telling me to take the job. I'm telling you that you're ready for it. Whether you take it is up to you. That afternoon, Rachel walked along the beach near Coronado, the same beach where she'd stood months ago feeling hopeless and lost. She thought about all the people who'd helped her get here, her father who'd never stopped believing in her, Captain Chen who'd given her a chance, Commander Hawkins who'd seen potential when everyone else saw only a coffee server. And she thought about the SEAL teams she'd trained, the intelligence she'd provided, the lives potentially saved by her work. Serving differently didn't mean serving less. It just meant serving with different tools. Rachel made her decision. The following week, she walked into Admiral Keller's office. I accept the position, sir. The Admiral smiled. Outstanding. You report to the Pentagon in 6 weeks. Use that time to close out your work here and get ready for the next challenge. Word spread quickly through Naval Special Warfare Command. Officers and enlisted personnel stopped by to congratulate her. The SEALs she'd trained thanked her for her work and wished her well. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, the intelligence officer who'd resented her, stopped by her desk on her last day. Tours, I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. When you first arrived, I thought you were trading on your SEAL reputation. I was wrong. You're a skilled analyst and you've made us all better. The work you're going to do at the Pentagon, it's important. Good luck. Rachel shook his hand. Thank you, sir, that means a lot. On her final Friday in Coronado, there was a small ceremony. Admiral Keller presented Rachel with a Navy Commendation Medal for her work in the Intelligence Division. Commander Hawkins gave a speech about her contributions. But the moment that mattered most came after the official ceremony ended. A young woman in Navy utilities approached Rachel hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 23, and she looked nervous. Lieutenant Tours, I'm Seaman Jennifer Michaels. I wanted to thank you. What for? I'm in the SEAL training pipeline. I'm one of only 2 women in my class, and sometimes it's really hard, you know. I wonder if I belong there. Jennifer's voice shook slightly. But then I heard about you, how you earned your trident, how you got injured but found a new way to serve, how you're now briefing admirals and shaping policy. It gives me hope that even if things don't go according to plan, I can still make a difference. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about herself a year ago, broken, bitter, feeling like her life was over. She'd never imagined she could be an inspiration to anyone. You belong there, Rachel told Jennifer firmly. Don't let anyone tell you different, and if you ever need someone to talk to, here's my contact information. She handed the young sailor a card. The path might not be what you expect, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Trust yourself. Jennifer nodded, blinking back her own tears. Thank you, ma'am. After the young sailor left, Commander Hawkins approached. That was a good thing you did, he said. She reminded me of myself, Rachel replied. Before everything happened, full of hope and determination. You're still full of those things, you've just added wisdom and perspective. Hawkins extended his hand. It's been an honor serving with you, Lieutenant. Go do great things in Washington. Rachel shook his hand firmly. Thank you for seeing me, sir, for recognizing that tattoo and giving me a chance to prove myself. I didn't give you anything you didn't earn, Hawkins said. I just opened a door. You walked through it on your own merit. That evening, Rachel packed up her apartment in Coronado. She looked at the photo on her bookshelf, the one from her SEAL graduation. For months, that photo had been a painful reminder of everything she'd lost. Now she saw it differently, not as a memorial to a dead dream, but as proof of what she'd accomplished. what she'd survived, what she'd overcome. Rachel packed the photo carefully in a box marked Pentagon. She was ready for the next chapter. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Rachel Torres walked into the Pentagon for her first day at the Joint Special Operations Cultural Intelligence Task Force. She wore her uniform with pride, the sealed trident tattoo visible on her forearm. She'd stopped hiding it months ago. The office was busy with officers from every branch of the military: Army Rangers, Air Force PJs, Marine Raiders, Navy SEALs. They looked at her with curiosity and respect. Her new boss, a Marine Corps colonel named Martinez, greeted her warmly. "Lieutenant Torres, your reputation precedes you. Admiral Keller speaks very highly of your work." "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to get started." "Good, because we have a lot to do. The entire Special Operations community is looking to us to develop better cultural intelligence capabilities." "No pressure, right?" Martinez smiled. "Your first assignment is to develop a training curriculum for all SOF forces deploying to the Middle East. Think you can handle that?" Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here. The injury, the humiliation, the coffee pots, the tattoo that had changed everything. "Yes, sir," she said confidently. "I can handle that." That night, Rachel called her father from her new apartment in Virginia. "How was the first day, Mija?" "It was good, Dad, really good. Challenging, but in the best way." "I'm proud of you," her father said. "You know that, right? Not because of your rank or your position, but because when life knocked you down, you got back up. When they tried to make you invisible, you made them see you. That takes real strength." Rachel looked out her window at the lights of Washington, D.C. "I almost gave up, Dad. There were days I thought about just taking the medical retirement and walking away." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." That's the difference between surviving and living, Rachel. Surviving is just getting through each day. Living is finding purpose even when the path changes. After they hung up, Rachel sat quietly for a moment. She thought about Commander Hawkins, who'd recognized a tattoo that meant brotherhood and service, who'd seen past the coffee pot to the person holding it. She thought about Captain Chen, who'd given her a chance to prove her worth. She thought about Admiral Keller, who'd trusted her with responsibilities beyond her experience. And she thought about Seaman Jennifer Michaels, the young woman in SEAL training who'd found hope in Rachel's story. Rachel Torres had earned her SEAL trident through blood, sweat, and determination. She'd lost her operational career through injury and circumstance beyond her control. But she'd found something new, a way to serve that was different but equally important. A way to save lives not with weapons but with wisdom. A way to lead not with physical strength but with knowledge and insight. The tattoo on her forearm was still there, as permanent as ever. But it meant something different now. Not a memorial to what she'd lost, but a reminder of what she'd earned and what she could never lose. Her identity, her worth, her ability to serve. Commander Hawkins had recognized that tattoo. He'd seen past the coffee pot and the uniform to the warrior beneath. And in doing so, he'd helped Rachel see herself clearly again. She was still a SEAL. She'd just found a new battlefield. And she was winning.